Hello, and welcome to the final day of the 2022 AAMC conference. I'm so pleased to be here in person to welcome those who are joining us both here in New York and virtually. My name is Beth Morrison, Senior Curator of Manuscripts at the J. Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles and Vice President for Governance and Nominating of the AAMC. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the peoples who are the traditional caretakers of the lands where we are holding this conference, the part of the homeland of the Lenape people. I know that many of us, wherever we are in the world, are attending today's event from the ancestral and unceded territories of Indigenous peoples, and we need to be cognizant of that fact. This year's conference has been centered on the concept of sustainability and revitalization. We have already heard in various keynotes, panels, and groups about important subjects centering on how we can ensure that our work as curators leaves a positive imprint on our colleagues, our audiences, and the world around us. This programming has received the generous support of numerous sponsors, whom I'd like to recognize on behalf of the AMC. Our lead sponsor, Sotheby's, along with friend sponsors, David Werner and the Bard Graduate Center. Our benefactor sponsor is WOVO, and our supporter sponsor is TAFOF. Individual donors who supported the conference include Michi Jagarjian, Marie Jose Kravis, Myung Lee, Renee and Richard Menschel, Fred and Nancy Poses, Anthony and Sandra Tamer, and Kristen Tierney. And finally, our foundation sponsor, the Samuel H. Kress Foundation. To all of you, we gratefully extend our warmest thanks. I know that we are all looking forward to our final half-day program, so to get today started, it is my pleasure to introduce Lisa Gold, Executive Director of the Asian American Arts Alliance. In her over 2 decades of service to cultural institutions, Lisa has been recognized as a strong supporter of creative producers developing inclusive programming and outreach initiatives. Her current work as the Asian American Arts Alliance extends their mission to ensure greater representation, equity, and opportunities for Asian American artists and cultural organizations through resource sharing, promotion, and community building. It is through Lisa and the Alliance's tireless advocacy for diversity and inclusion that we can see how local organizations are having a real impact in our field. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Beth, and everyone at AAMC. I'm sorry, I'm recovering from a bit of a cold. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. It's really an honor to be here during Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month to share a few words about our organization, A4, and the work that we do to, as you said, ensure greater representation, equity, and opportunities. But before I talk about A4, I'm going to ask you to think about your favorite Asian American artist and your favorite Asian American writer and your favorite Asian American musician and your favorite Asian American actor. And if you drew a blank at any point, I'd like you to consider why. And that why is the reason for A4's existence. You know, we're a service organization. We were founded almost 40 years ago by a group of artists and activists who face discrimination, marginalization, misunderstanding, gaslighting, and an utter lack of representation in almost every artistic arena. But sadly, that lack of representation continues today. You know, Asian Americans make up almost 18% of the New York City population. And yet we don't account for 18% of the books that are reviewed by the New York Times. We don't account for 18% of the exhibitions that are reviewed in art form. We certainly don't account for 18% of the shows in galleries in Chelsea. So we work to try to correct those statistics. You know, we offer professional development opportunities, training, networking, mentorship, and fellowships to help artists and arts administrators succeed in their chosen fields. We work across disciplines and we uplift the work of our community through promotion and resource sharing. And we encourage leaders like you, who are cultural gatekeepers, to pay attention to the work of Asian American and Pacific Islander artists. And we organize a monthly meeting of AAPI arts leaders to support each other and help advocate for fairer funding and greater awareness. Lack of representation and lack of funding go hand in hand. Did you know that for every $100 awarded by foundations for work in the United States, only 20 cents is designated for AAPI communities? That statistic comes from a recent report by APIP, Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and Philanthropy. Here's another great statistic. A recent study by Launch, Leading Asian Americans to Unite for Change, showed that when asked to name a famous Asian American, the top response, 42%, was don't know, followed by actor Jackie Chan, who's not a US citizen, and then in third place by Bruce Lee, who is quite dead. Only 2% of respondents named Vice President Kamala Harris. So for years, Asian American and Pacific Islander artists have been rendered invisible or overlooked. I remember having a conversation with a well-known curator just a few years ago who was organizing an exhibition in Asia of New York artists in the 80s. When I asked them if they were including any Asian Americans in that show, they said to me, well, no, there weren't any then. So things are starting to change, but very slowly. Artist collectives like Basement Workshop and Godzilla have started to recently been receiving more critical attention. The latter is the subject of an excellent anthology by Howie Chen. The former is the subject of an exhibition on the Virtual Asian American Art Museum, which was started by Alexandra Cheng. You can check that out, VAM. And the New York Museum is currently presenting Carlos Villa, Worlds in Collision. It is the first major museum retrospective dedicated to the work of a Filipino American artist, the first in 2022. People are paying $500 for Mitski tickets at Radio City Music Hall, and Kumail Nanjiani almost broke the internet with his thirsty selfies, teasing his role in Marvel's Eternals. And Amanda Phingpoti Bhatia has reclaimed public space with giant displays of her work in Times Square and the Atlantic Terminal right here in downtown Brooklyn and the David Koch Theater at Lincoln Center. But there is so much more work to be done. There is a rich and nuanced history of contemporary art created by Asian Americans. And I encourage you all to be curious and to consider the role you play in ensuring this work is seen and that there is equitable and clear representation of Asian Americans in museums and galleries across this country. Thank you. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer. And if not, I would like to recommend that you all check out Bob Lee's Asian American Arts Center, which has a great list of Asian American artists, as well as VAM, as I mentioned, the Virtual Asian American Arts Museum, which was started by Alexandra Cheng at Rutgers University. Actually, she started it when she was at NYU. But there are plenty of other resources too, such as A4. We have a great calendar that lists all sorts of events and exhibitions by fantastic artists. So with that, I will give you back 5 minutes of your morning. Okay, thank you.